that the city had not given any public notice of this hearing today. It isn't on the website that has the hearing examiner's calendar, and it isn't on the general website, or at least it wasn't as of Monday. I haven't checked today. We asked the city by email to confirm that going ahead without such notice would comply with its code and that the city would defend going ahead today. And we got an email last evening from Mr. Lell declining to confirm either of those things, declining to confirm that the hearing without public notice complied with its code, or that the city would defend conducting the hearing today. If the position that was articulated to us last night is still the city's position, then I think we have no choice but to continue this hearing and give appropriate public notice of it.
Mr. Lyle, go ahead.
Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Examiner, when this issue was brought to the city's attention, we conferred internally trying to figure out how this came about, and I think there was an apparent disconnect based on some communications with the hearing examiner's office from when the pandemic first arose. As the examiner may recall, the March 9th hearing was originally continued to a date certain, March 20th, and in that circumstance, there would have been no additional public notice required. The unanticipated wrinkle that occurred after that, of course, was the coronavirus pandemic and the city's decision based on the governor's order to essentially cancel all of its outstanding and pending land use hearings. So when the staff worked with your office to reconvene and reschedule the preliminary plat hearing for today's date, I think that it's essentially got lost in the shuffle as to whether or not to provide additional public notice rather than simply continue it as if it was a date certain, which it was not. So to address Mr. Schneider's point, staff is ready to either proceed today, in which case we would be happy to provide a public notice that was compliant with the city's code for an additional public hearing date at some point 15 days plus in the future, during which members of the public could come and testify. That notice would include a link that members of the public could access and observe today's proceedings. That's one option. The other, as Mr. Snyder indicated, would be to simply continue the hearing until notice under the city's code has been provided. Staff is prepared to do either one of those, and we will defer to the applicant if the applicant's preference is to simply continue the hearing date until the code notice has been provided.
Right. Clearly, this was, an issue with what happened. I mean, we had day one, we were going to go to day two, and then the world fell apart. And I think that did create confusion. If my office was partially to blame, I apologize. But ultimately, my view would be the notice issue, I think, could be cured with what was proposed, which is we move forward today because we're already an hour in. We haven't even started the hearing, working out the audio, and then we set a date certain. And if members of the public want to provide public testimony, they'd have that opportunity on that additional hearing date. I don't expect that will ultimately happen, to the extent that there's been very little to no interest from the public. And really, this is just a never-ending legal battle between the city and the applicant that the public does not seem to have much interest in. But I agree it would be beneficial to at least give members of the public an opportunity to participate. Mr. Lowe, go ahead, and then I'll hear from Mr. Schneider. 2
points, Mr. Examiner. It was not my intent to insinuate that it was your office that was somehow the root of this issue. So I did not
always possible
mean to convey that. I just recall that I believe that there was an original communication that may have been misinterpreted by staff. We haven't been able to dive too deeper into that. Second, my recollection from the March 9th hearing was that apart from the applicant contingent and the members of the city staff who were present at the hearing, I don't believe there were any members of the public in the room. And the other people on this call can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that kind of underscores your premise, Mr. Examiner, as to the relative lack of public interest in this proceeding, and the fact that as a practical matter, no one cared enough to be here in the first installment, such that they wouldn't be here today.
That was my understanding as well. So, Mr. Schneider, your thoughts based on that?
Well, again, I have a written email from Mr. Lell declining to confirm that going ahead today complies with the city's code and that the city will defend it. There are, as I understand it, parties of record who should be given notice, who commented on the application. And I am reluctant to go ahead and create a legal issue that is unnecessary, that could give a project opponent the opportunity to come in and undermine all the effort that we put into this today. So unless client Tia Heim feels otherwise in light of what she's heard, I think I have no choice but to request continuance for appropriate public notice be given. There are enough fraught legal issues with this without creating an unnecessary one.
Okay, Mr. Lell, response? You're still muted, Zach.
Pardon me? Can you hear me?
Now I can.
The city will defer to Mr. Snyder's preference on that, and with the examiner's assistance, if the continuance is the approach that the parties are headed toward, we'd be happy to work with you as expeditiously as possible to schedule a hearing date within the next few weeks that would be code compliant and as expeditiously scheduled as possible.
I would prefer that we try and schedule the next day now. It took 4 months to get this date scheduled. We learned at a public records request that, Mr. Reeves, you alerted the city to the fact that you could do these meetings and these hearings electronically in March, but it's now July. So I hope we can reschedule today to a date certain. We have our chief witness, Mr. Valdez, here. So if people have their calendars, I would suggest we reschedule it in real time now.
I prefer that too. I recognize that this just keeps going, and I'd like to get it concluded so that I know I'm only a speed bump in the long road down whatever loop or rabbit hole this is going. So the faster we can get through me, the quicker you guys can all fight in the report. So I am available next, if we go 15, what is it, 15 days? It's not business days, it's just days, correct?
So I'm doing this from memory, checking in the last day or so. I believe we have to do 10 days of notice, and that would be the applicant updating the sign, a mailing to all the property owners within 300 feet, notice to parties of record, and publication in a newspaper. So I think we're looking at least 2 weeks to be able to get that in the mail. Getting it in the newspaper is not as much of a challenge because we're using the Seattle Times during the pandemic.
Okay, so I have availability. The earliest, this seems too early to me, but I'll throw out would be July 22nd, which is a Wednesday, but I don't know if that gives adequate time to cure this issue.
I'm not. I'm not sure, I don't know that we can get it in the mail by Friday, which I believe would be our 10 days.
Right. So I want to avoid coming back and having this same exact problem. So what about July 24th, which is a Friday? Obviously not ideal, but I'm available. Is that still too soon?
I think the city would be able to make that.
Okay, the city, I'm getting Zach nodding. Lucy says yes. Candy's doing advanced math on her fingers. Sorry, Candy, go ahead. If you, okay.
I was just trying to calculate the time frame of when we can get it posted, actually printed in the mail, and if it's 15 days in the time frame works.
I believe it's 10 days, Candy, not 15. So if it was 15, we'd have a problem.
Can someone look that up and just let's make sure 100%?
I can't do the 24th.
Okay, well, that solves that problem. Then my next available date is July 31st, also a Friday. And
Can you guys hear me? This is Doug.
okay. Yeah, Doug, we can hear you.
I'm not available on the 31st.
Okay, let's see.
That concludes my test.
All right. I have.
So just to get, while we're looking at calendars, 1804-180C types of public notice. And it says that it's 10 days unless specified otherwise in this section. So that's parties of record notification to adjacent property owners, local newspaper, and property posting. All are in that section. So I think we're good with 10 days. So it's just a question of staff availability and being able to get it in the mail. And Candy would be in charge. She isn't doing the mailing, but she would help us coordinate that. So
Okay, so it was determined that July, let's see, 24th, there were conflicts. July 31st, there were conflicts. The next week, I am available Monday, August 3rd, Wednesday, August 5th, and Friday, August 7th. Did everyone hear me?
Zach, Andrew, could you say those again?
Sure.
August.
Monday, August 3rd, Wednesday, August 5th, or Friday, August 7th. Mr. Schneider, does that any of those dates?
All three of those dates work for me. We could check with Tia and with Mark.
Sure, let's check with Tia. Tia?
Those all work for me.
Okay, Mark?
Those all work for me.
Okay, so the applicant team is fine. Any preference? I'd prefer that Monday, but I'm getting a nod from Tia. Pat, Monday work?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if that'll work for city staff. So, Lucy, are you able to?
Yes, I'm confirming one thing, but I believe the third works.
What about Zach?
I will make that work, Mr. Examiner.
Zach, you're always accommodating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see who else. Keith, any issue for you there?
No, I'm good. That'll work for me.
Candy, you're ultimately the backbone. What about you? Thumbs up. Okay, so we're gonna wait on Doug says yes. So just waiting to hear from Lucy, I believe.
So let's say yes. I'm not getting a confirmation, but I believe that'll work. I'll figure it out.
Okay, so the idea would be then Monday, August 3rd, same story. We'd have 8 a.m. to check tech, which hopefully will be much easier next go round. And the hearing will start at 9 o'clock. Does that make sense to everyone? Just nod vigorously if this makes sense. Okay. Other matters, perhaps we should unmute Pat and Lucy at this point. But I know the parties are intending on admitting exhibits. Again, they would not be considered officially admitted till we go on the record, but it could save a lot of effort and time if I, the hearing examiner, am able to see those proposed exhibits in advance of August 3rd. Just throwing that out there as an option. If people would like to submit proposed exhibits without exhibit numbers, meaning the documents they intend to share on August 3rd, I would certainly prefer that so that, I can be a knowledgeable participant. But, I know that there's challenges with what's going on, and people might be tempted to want to then prepare responses to the new exhibits, and it can be endless. But my thinking is, you all were ready to go today. I would suggest you submit the proposed exhibits, and everyone agrees that, yeah, if you want to prepare some kind of a response, I'm not going to look at it in advance of the hearing because I have not even admitted those proposed exhibits. Does that make sense?
I understand sharing them with you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. I'm not clear why we're sharing them with each other.
Because it's a public hearing. It's not an appeal hearing. It's an open record public hearing. If you want them ultimately admitted into the record, if this was any other situation than the fact it's the IHIF application and there's all this history, those proposed exhibits would already have exhibit numbers and they'd be publicly available. Mr. Lowe, go ahead.
I believe what Ms. Sloman was getting at is just the fairness factor of submitting the exhibits essentially at the same time, which would be our preference. Both parties have a specific deadline.
Yeah, today. We were all ready to go today, were we not? I mean, I know there's this notice problem, so we're having to move this out almost a month. But I would suggest that everyone had the exhibits. Lucy was going to share some, Pat was going to share some. Give them to me today, make them publicly available. If you have responses based on what you see, then we can deal with that on August 3rd. But I think you were going to submit these potentially as exhibits today. I think it would be beneficial. I'd be happy to give them exhibit numbers now, and people can object to them or complain about them on August 3rd. But the secrecy factor is not helping not helping this process move forward. We need to be more transparent, and we need to try to get to a resolution.
This is Pat. I certainly agree that we should share them ahead of time. I would request that it not be today, however, simply because there's one exhibit that we want to update in light of what is happening this morning. So I would suggest the hearing examiner choose a time after today that we mutually exchange the exhibits.
Okay, how about next Monday?
That's fine.
So this is what I suggest. We're going to say that the additional exhibits should be submitted by Monday, July 13th. To be clear, has everyone seen the updated exhibit list that staff prepared? It goes through document UU or exhibit UU. I want to make sure that Tia and Pat have seen that. It tracked with my notes. I had an entire notepad of notes from last time, and I went through meticulously, and it does track for me, but I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. There were pleadings that came in afterward that I would include ultimately in the record, but I don't believe they need to be included with exhibit numbers. Pat and Zach and Tia, is everyone kind of on the same page on the exhibits currently?
This is Pat. I have just one question about that. When we submitted our response to Ms. Sloman's email that he sent out 2 days after the last hearing with the plans, we included a number of exhibits as attachments to that pleading that I think should be separate exhibits. So the question, I think, is, do you want to make that pleading with the attachments exhibit an exhibit, or should we take those attachments and submit them as separate exhibits?
I think I would prefer to make those separate exhibits, and I'm happy to, say that essentially the attachments to that pleading would be, where are we at? UUVV.
Okay.
So attachments to pleading are VV.
And we can have, VV 1, 2, 3, and 4, so forth.
Yeah, that's fine. And then I'm going to get on Monday, right? I'm going to get two things, correct? I'm going to get whatever exhibits that you have, right, Pat?
Yes.
Why don't we just assume those will be WW? And then I'm going to get what Zach and Lucy have also Monday. And why don't we make those XX and they can be numbered? And then the notice itself, I'll just put in with the other notice docs. They don't need a new exhibit number. But does that sort of track for everybody at this point? Sort of nodding from Zach. What do you think?
Are we providing those new exhibits to you electronically, or are we sending you hard copies?
At this point, electronic would be fine. I like the 1 point, if everyone's using that OneDrive system, that would be the easiest way, would be upload them, or essentially provide them to Candy, who will upload them with the appropriate sort of exhibit numbers. But again, the attachments would be to the pleading that happened just after things shut down. That would be VV 1, 2, 3, 4. Pat, I'll let you label them how you want. Get those to Candy, and your new exhibits will be WW 1, 2, 3, however you want them labeled. Get those to Candy, and then Lucy and Zach, yours will be XX 1, 2, 3, however you want. Those can all be uploaded to OneDrive, and that way, if there is public interest or something, people can look at them. I understand there may be objections or problems that folks have with those exhibits. Those can be raised on August 3rd. Does that track? I just want, I want to be aware of what's going on. So, I hate showing up and getting a stack of exhibits I haven't had an opportunity to review, because then I might have questions and, I'm not knowledgeable. So I'd much prefer that I know what's going on in advance of the hearing. I do read this stuff, guys. So does that, I'll go one at a time. So Pat Schneider, did that track with you?
Yes, it does. Thank you. There is one lingering issue, though. I had the same problem you did downloading from the OneDrive what appeared to be a second set of exhibits. I just like the city to confirm that there's nothing in that we should be seeing. But it was a crop file that I couldn't open.
Yeah, so let's unmute Candy to see. Candy, do you have any idea what that was or what the issue was?
I unfortunately, because I sent it, I don't get to see what you guys received. I didn't get an alert that there was any problems with it, unfortunately. I can pull up the SharePoint site real quick and look at it.
Yeah.
And
So
verify.
since Mr. Snyder was missing part of the conversation, I just wanted to repeat what I had sent to Candy to upload, just so you're aware of what the intended contents of that was. One was the staff report and all of its original attachments, which was attachments A through O2. Then it was all the new attachments or exhibits that were added at the March 9th meeting, which was O3, and then I think Q through UU. And then the third thing was an updated exhibit list reflecting all of those added exhibits. So that was what was in the OneDrive. It's materials that everyone had, but at your request, Candy put that on a OneDrive to be accessible as one single source.
Yeah, and so Candy, what I'm seeing on OneDrive, it's labeled as new exhibits 2. New exhibits 1, I didn't have any problem with. And that, let's see if I can, that's 668 short pages. And let me see what that ends on. That ended on exhibit UU. So I'm not quite sure what else would be involved, to the extent that if we've got the original exhibits and we've got through UU. I don't know if it's maybe, say, exhibit Q, which is the entire Grand Ridge Agreement, or exhibit P, which is a different version of the development agreement. Maybe that got made its own file or something. I certainly have hard copies, but would suggest we
I believe that both of the development agreements, well, certainly the link Q is a link. It was not the whole document. I don't remember. I think P we did have, which is that signed version that you just showed us. I don't think that was scanned in, and but the FEIS was, which I believe was Exhibit T.
So I would suggest that we just delete what is called new exhibits 2 off the OneDrive so that nobody else has any confusion. If Candy's able, or someone's able to do that. And then if there was something that appears to be missing, if people are looking for a electronic version of a document and they can't find it, just, ask Candy, and if it needs to be uploaded to OneDrive, I don't have any issue with that. I mean, theoretically, I have physical copies of everything that came in prior to our previous hearing, and then the new, the pleading that had the attachments. Make sure to that'll be on OneDrive as VV111234, etc. The applicant's new exhibits, again, OneDrive WW123 down, and the city's new exhibits XX123 down. So I think we'll have a complete record. So Pat, I think if we just eliminate whatever that corrupt file was, if someone's missing something, let everybody know, I guess. But I certainly don't seem to be missing anything from that.
That all makes sense to me. Thank you.
Great. Did you have any further thoughts?
Well, the one issue I think is how we memorialize what has happened here. It seems to me since this is not being recorded, it seems to me we either need to come back and record it, which I would prefer, just to have an explanation of what has happened, or we're going to have to start out the next meeting by that explanation. But at the moment, I don't think there's a public record of what has happened this morning.
We are actually being recorded right now.
Correct. I did not start recording when we were doing all the AV audio testing at the beginning of the meeting. But when when we did start talking about stuff, which I believe I'm like 45 minutes into the recording right now. So there is a record. It just started halfway between, can you hear me now, discussions. And I can send that out to you.
Yeah, well, that may make sense. If you can send that out to us, we can see when it started and see whether we need to add anything to it at the commencement of the next hearing then.
Zach, you had a thought there?
Very briefly, I concur with Mr. Schneider's original thought to memorialize this, if nothing else, in a very brief order or directive, if preferable, if possible, from your office, just summarizing how we got from A to B and the fact that the hearing is being continued until this this date in early August. That would be my preference and request.
I have no issue with that. So I had set aside all day to do this hearing, so I certainly have time to produce a quick order. And that order will essentially just say that there was this unfortunate, oversight in relation to notice, and the parties agreed to continue the hearing until August 3rd at 8 a.m. And that appropriate notice would then be provided. And moreover, I can memorialize the agreement on, the proposed exhibits if people want that. But I think, and Lucy, you had something else?
So you said 8 o'clock on August 3rd. I think we would do an AV test at 8, but start the hearing at 9.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, just wanted to confirm so that we get the notice correct.
Yeah, the notice should be 9, not 8.
Okay.
So one follow-up question about the notice.
Sure.
When Ms. Sloman was talking earlier, she referred to updating the sign on the property. I don't know whether that is required under the code or not, but I want to make sure if the city thinks that needs to happen, I'd like Ms. Heim and Ms. Sloman to make sure they both understand who's going to do what.
Yeah, and I would just add that if we are going to be updating the sign, if the applicant's doing it, we need to understand from the city what you want it to say as far as location, because this is not obviously a typical hearing.
So yes, the applicant would update the sign. Yes, you are correct. It's not a typical, I think we would probably direct someone to a website or telephone number to get the information on how to participate. We are just beginning to do that this week at the city with other commissions. And so I will work with with Candy and the city clerk to make sure that we're using the information that we're providing will assist a member of the public in participating. And I will connect with you, Tia, to make sure that what goes on the sign will make sense for someone who, understanding that it is not a physical location.
Okay, thank you. Just keep in mind, it does take a couple days to get somebody out there, so we need to have that text sooner rather than later.
Certainly, and that's the one advantage of the August 3rd date. It gives us a little more time to sort out some of these unusual factors, and I will try and get it to you next week.
Okay, so let me just do a round robin to make sure. So, Mr. Pat Schneider, once again, have we covered everything in your mind?
I believe so. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tia Heim, also for the applicant.
I'm all good.
Okay, it's listed as Mavel. I know that's not right, but that is...
Is that myself?
Is that Mark Valdu?
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
We'll see you on the 3rd.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zach Lowe.
No further comments, and your approach makes sense to the city. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Lucy Sloman, all set?
All set.
All right, Doug, you can nod. I'm worried about, no, we've got your audio, but Doug, can you unmute? Let's test it one more time. It never works.
I'm good.
Hey, there we go. And Keith, I think you're fine. You're smiling big. Okay. And Gus is our tech. Thank you for your help today, Gus. So I will plan on producing an order, which I will send to Candy later today. She'll get it to all the parties, memorializing kind of that we continued this and what happened, and it's going to be pretty basic, but it will cover it, just the basics of what was agreed to today. We'll come back August 3rd. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. I know this is not an ideal way to do this kind of thing, but we're stumbling through as best we can. So with that, we'll go ahead and end the hearing today. Wishing everyone safety and good health, and see everybody on August 3rd.
Candy, did you want to stay on for a second? Okay. All right.
Okay.
All right.
So let me hit stop on this recording. Do you want to stop?